How much cheaper is it to fuel up an EV right now in the US compared to a gas-powered car? And are fossil fuel companies' decarbonization plans aligned with the Paris Climate Accord? Welcome to the Climate Recap from the Beckisphere Climate Corner, your go-to place for international and US-based climate news. I'm Becky Hoke, a science writer. Today is Thursday, August 18th. Let's jump right into today's news. Let's start with some extreme weather events. The UK saw heavy rainfalls, with parts of Scotland seeing a week's worth of rain in a 24-hour period. The Met Office reported a yellow risk of thunderstorms, travel disruptions, and power cuts. The heavy rainfall is particularly dangerous for England because much of it has been experiencing a drought and the most prolonged heat waves they've seen in 15 years. The area is dried out, and places with less vegetation don't absorb water as well. Exhibit A, the European agency issued flood warnings for about 20 regions of Midlands and Southeast England. The drought in Mexico, which I covered on August 9th's episode, is stretching into southern Texas as the Rio Grande dries up. Millions of people and a $1 billion agriculture industry rely on this water, but reservoirs are rapidly dropping to a record low. Lake Falcon is only 9% full, and Lake Almastad is only 1/3 full. Two of South Texas's most populous cities issued disaster declarations last week. If nothing changes, water for 3 billion people will dry up by March 2023. While climate change dries out the water supply, the populations of two large Mexican cities, Matamoros and Reynosa, have doubled since the 1980s. The Rio Grande is fed by the North Mexican mountains, and Mexico owes about 1/3 of the Rio Grande water to Texas as per a 1944 Mexico-Texas treaty, but recently they haven't been able to supply that amount. To be fair, the U.S. might not have much from the Colorado River to give Mexico soon. Speaking of which, the Interior Department and the Bureau of Land Management have spared western states from Colorado River water cutbacks for now. In June, the BLM told Arizona, California, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming to have a plan in 60 days to reduce water use by 15 to 30% next year. Now only Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico will reduce their water consumption. The Bureau and Department say they will still work with all the states to reduce water consumption. We talked on Tuesday about how California just announced a new water reduction plan, though it relies a lot on desalination and doesn't impact agriculture much. Time for some climate studies. Continuing the theme of drought, climate change is threatening the terrestrial water supply of the Tibetan Plateau, according to a new study published in the journal Nature Climate Change. 10 of Asia's major rivers flow from the plateau that together provide water for about 1.4 billion people. Despite this significance, not much research has been done on how climate change impacts this water supply. This collaborative study between Chinese and American researchers tries to fill in the blanks. The Tibetan water supply saw a significant decline from 2012 to 2017. Additionally, in the mid-emission scenario, the Amu Darya and Indus basins could decline by 119 and 79% respectively by 2050. Not good. Something important to point out about the U.S. heat belt I talked about on Tuesday is that many of the communities likely to see at least one day of 125 degrees Fahrenheit a year by 2050 have high percentages of minority groups. E&E News combined the First Street Foundation's data with census information and found that a higher percentage of people of color corresponded with a higher number of days they're expected to exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit next year and in 2053. The differences are stark. Next year, communities with less than 5% people of color will likely see about 10.3 days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while communities with at least 75% people of color will likely see about 29.1 days above 100 degrees. In 2053, these numbers are expected to rise to 19.3 days and 44.4 days respectively. It's important to note as well that minority groups have a higher likelihood of having an outdoor job where they can be exposed to the heat or be around chemicals that impact their health. Let's look at some climate victories. U.S. President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, aka the biggest climate bill in U.S. history. It allocates $375 billion to fight climate change over the next decade by scaling up clean energy, incentivizing sustainable agriculture, increasing funding for climate predictions and modeling, incentivizing energy efficiency, and funding drought prevention, to name a few things. It also increases royalty costs for fossil fuel companies that want to buy land leases. There are a few negative aspects of the bill, such as requiring lease sales on federal lands for fossil fuel projects to come with lease sales for clean energy, though it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It also promises more fossil fuel development in the Gulf of Mexico and Alaska. If you want to learn more about what's in the act, I did a YouTube video on it, which you can find the link for in the description box below. I've made a few updates on things I've learned in recent podcast episodes too. For example, a new repeat project predicts that the U.S. will see a 13% decline in fossil fuel demand from 2021 levels due to this bill, but it's unlikely to cause a sustained decline, unfortunately. I also recently learned that the electric vehicle plants that will be subsidized by the bill will mainly be in the Midwest and South. A belt is forming to the right of the heat belt, with many factories for either EVs, batteries, or both being in Michigan down to Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. There are also a lot of those factories being built in Ontario, Canada, but that's unrelated to the US bill. It just completes the belt. But overall, this bill could get us to about 40% emissions reduction compared to 2005 levels by 2030. It's still not enough to keep warming at or below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels like the Paris Climate Accord shoots for, but it puts the historically largest emitter back in the decarbonization game. So yay! This is a huge win. The Department of Energy noted the difference in fuel costs between having an electric vehicle, plug-in hybrid vehicle, and a gas-powered vehicle. They looked at the annual fueling costs for cars, pickup trucks, SUVs, and vans, assuming gas costs $4.87 per gallon and electricity costs 13 cents per kilowatt hour. Electric vehicles cost less than $1,000 a year to fill up based on current fuel costs. There aren't currently any electric vans. Plug-in hybrid cars cost about $2,500, while the types of SUVs and vans cost less than $2,000. There are currently no plug-in hybrid pickups. Hybrid cars and pickups cost around $3,000, while SUVs cost around $3,400 and vans cost around $2,000. And finally, conventional cars cost about $3,800, pickups cost around $4,000, SUVs cost around $3,700, and vans cost around $3,500. So you can see how the heavier vehicles are, the less being electric helps, but it still makes a big difference. Of course, electric are still more expensive, but depending on how much you'd like to drive, they'll pay themselves back. Back to drought talk, Los Angeles residents are finally coming around to the idea that maintaining lawns in the desert is an unsustainable practice. Artificial grass, cacti, and native plants are becoming more common. About 300 applicants a month have sought rebates for replacing grass over the last year, according to the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. The district serves 19 million people. Well, recently this number has been growing. May saw 870 applicants, June saw 1,400 applicants. A recent study by the water agency determines that for every 100 homeowners that took advantage of this rebate, another 132 homes also made the switch without the incentive. We have a few climate fails. A new study published in the journal Nature Communications shows that Shell, BP, and Equinor's decarbonization plans will, shockingly, not align with the Paris Climate Accord targets. I'll be honest though, I expected their projections to be worse than they are. The most off-target plan is Shell's Sky 1.5 plan because it peaks the planet's temperature at 1.8 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2069 to get to 1.6 degrees Celsius in 2100. For reference, the closest roadmap to get us to 1.5 degrees Celsius is the International Energy Agency one, which sees the global temperature peaking at 1.78 degrees Celsius in 2056 to land at 1.55 degrees Celsius by 2100. BP's Rapid Plan and Equinor's Rebalance Plan were similar, causing global warming to peak at 1.73 degrees Celsius by around 2059 to land at 1.6 degrees Celsius by 2100. You're probably thinking, hey, that doesn't sound that bad. Well, how early and high we peak matters because it impacts how long the planet has to stay in a more distressed state. And keep in mind that their plans heavily rely on carbon capture technology, and there's no guarantee that that technology will be able to perform at the rate they predict. They also have a bad habit of undercounting emissions and don't usually include emissions coming from their products after they're sold. And I would love to actually see how they're doing at following their decarbonization plans at all. Just saying. Also, Note that all these fossil fuel companies are coming from Europe, where they have been pressured more to have a real plan. Many US-based fossil fuel companies have comparatively a half-baked net zero roadmap. The UK High Court sided with the oil giant Esso to allow an interim injunction to prevent climate activists from blocking the construction of a vast aviation fuel pipeline being built in South England for Heathrow Airport. Esso is owned by ExxonMobil, and the company insists the pipeline will take 100 tankers off the road, reducing the oil's travel emissions. But climate activists say that it will just double the flow of fuel from Hampshire to Heathrow, furthering the country's reliance on fossil fuels. They've been interfering with equipment and tunneled underground where the pipeline crosses the M25 to camp there. They cannot do that anymore. The last story today is very weird. The National Science Foundation has been funding this huge ecological study that involves putting sulfur hexafluoride, or SF6, one of the most potent greenhouse gases in the world, into federal parks and forests to track the long-term changes of global warming. What? Researchers put it in the waterways to track how quickly the gas leaves the water and enters the atmosphere, because they worry freshwater streams might be a bigger source of greenhouse gas emissions than previously thought. This gas has been used for years for freshwater studies, and studies can be done by releasing small quantities. Scientists used to think the chemical wasn't as bad for the environment as it turns out it is. Yellowstone National Park pushed the National Park Service to investigate SF6 more closely in 2020, and it turns out that they were right to say something. SF6 is 22,800 times a more potent greenhouse gas than CO2, and it lasts in the atmosphere for thousands of years, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. This study has released 108 pounds of it into the environment so far. As it's expected to continue for 30 years, the emissions overall will likely be equivalent to burning about 1 million pounds of coal. That's not very much in the grand scheme of things, so now the question is whether to keep using the gas or not. Some criticize Yellowstone for wanting researchers to stop using SF6 when the cars that drive through the park do more damage. Some scientists say this is a bad look for the community because they should be leading by example and that the study's lifespan should therefore be shortened. Other scientists want the use of SF6 to stop immediately and have penned a letter to the Interior Department about it. If you're on YouTube, what do you think about this? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And that was your climate recap for Thursday, August 18th. If you like the work I do, please follow this podcast, give it a 5-star rating, leave a review, and consider checking out the Beckisphere Climate Corner YouTube channel. Remember to talk about the climate crisis every single day and to support your local news organizations. Bye for now.